Well, we are very fortunate now to welcome Brett Robbins of Ascendant Studios, the game director for Immortals of Aveum, onto the show. This has been a long time coming. Brett, of course, is a longtime veteran of the gaming industry with a resume that includes games like Call of Duty and Dead Space, as well as many others. Brett, welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. It's great to be here.
I'm so excited to have you here. It's been a long time coming for me because Immortals of Aveum has had just a really cool run up. It had that launch in August. I have so many questions to get to you about, but I think it's more prudent to say, let's start with Ascendant. Tell me a little bit about Ascendant Studios, because this is a new studio.
Ascendant Studios is a new studio. I formed it in 2018, so we've been going a little over 5 years now. I founded it really to make Immortals of Aveum. That was the entire genesis of the company, was to make this one game. And like you said, we launched it a couple months ago. So it was a 5-year development, and it was a roller coaster, and it was amazing. And I'm really happy that the game is out there in the world now.
I'd have to imagine that was a stressful, strange 5 years because you started in 2018, a pandemic hits partway through. What do you do? That had to be strange.
Yeah, it was crazy. We had all sorts of challenges. I mean, I had never started a studio before. I had worked at a lot of big companies. I had worked at, I started my career at Crystal Dynamics, and then Electronic Arts, and then Activision, making Call of Duty. So I was used to being kind of a smaller cog in a larger machine, and suddenly I was having to figure out how to balance a budget and pay people and do basic things like that. And so the learning curve was very steep. And yeah, we had about 30 or 35 people at the beginning of 2020, and we had a great prototype we had been working on and everything. And then the pandemic hit, and I had to shut the doors, and we all had to go home and start to figure out how to work remotely, just as everyone else did at the time. I'll be honest. I thought, well, this might be it. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how we do this, but bit by bit, we kind of figured it out. Actually, and there were some silver linings to it. We one big thing that changed, and I think this changed for a lot of people, is I had always thought about hiring locally, people just down the street, or people that could commute in. And once we realized that's not going to be a factor for the foreseeable future, it became about well, let's just get the best people we can anywhere they are, and we cast our net really wide. And suddenly, I was just finding amazing people in all corners of the country and beyond the country, and that accelerated my hiring and allowed me just to kind of tap into talent that I wouldn't have even thought of before. So there were some silver linings to it, but of course, it was an incredibly stressful time and really hard on everyone. So I'm glad we're seeing the tail end of it. It's in our rearview mirror now.
Certainly so. To go from being a cog in the machine to being the guy that has to make those decisions, navigate things like payroll while also hiring, casting a worldwide net, moving file sizes that are so large. I have to imagine there was a lot of pivoting at various points. How much did that affect the project as you went through it? Change the scope or anything?
Yeah, we pivoted quite a bit. We spent the first year not really sure what we're making. I knew I wanted to make a first-person shooter, but adding magic and making it a fantasy shooter and all this stuff was something pretty different. And I didn't want it to feel like every other game out there. So we experimented for a long time. We went down some questionable roads in terms of how the gameplay might work, and actually got I would say made some mistakes, and pivoted. And then it was probably about a year in where I just said, "Oh, okay, look. First and foremost, this has to be an awesome shooter. Let's just focus on the shooting fundamentals and make that feel great, and then we can layer on all the other cool stuff we want to do
Mm-hmm.
with the spells and the enemies and all that stuff." And that resulted in a combat demo that was awesome. It was like really, really fun to play. I think we all saw the vision at that point. That's when companies like EA got interested in us, and and we're really excited about what we were doing. So that became like the foundation for everything. Okay, let's layer the whole game on top of that and build it out. So yeah, that was a huge pivot for me. And it's hard. It's hard to, you're going down one road and you have 45 people really working on something. You go, we got to do a left turn and go in this other direction. But it paid off.
You said that Ascendant Studios was created to make Immortals of Aveum. In your mind, did the studio come first or the IP? You're finding your way making magic shooter. Was it always a magic shooter? How did the IP change? Which was first?
Yeah, so I started with the idea of a magic shooter. That was before I founded the studio. That was when I was talking to my investor about what I wanted to do. That idea came, kind of evolved over time while I was working on Call of Duty. Um, and I knew that was the game. And I had, even before I founded the studio, I had something like a 60-page design document that I had written. Um, and that kind of formed the basis for what the game was going to be. And it was really, founding the company was really just in service of creating a team and creating a studio that could make this particular game. Of course, I then wanted to create a studio that would go on forever. So, there was a lot of thought and work put into what are the values of the studio, what are the pillars, what are the things that we're going to do differently. I had at that point been making games for 22 years, so I had a lot of opinions about what really works in the studio and what doesn't work, and I tried to bring a lot of that to bear in what the values of the company were going to be.
Do you feel like you got it right?
I think we've done a really good job. I mean, there's some, I guess, metrics you can look at, things like turnover rate or attrition. How often do people not want to work for you?
Mm-hmm.
And that's extremely low for us.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've created a culture and an environment where people feel comfortable. They feel they can be creative. They can have their own autonomy to some degree, and being able to have, you know, create some mastery over what they're trying to do in their individual disciplines.
Mm-hmm.
The disciplines work with each other well. It's all just a testament to the leads and the directors and the people that we've hired that are just awesome. I mean, they're professionals. A lot of them have a lot of AAA experience. They've worked on big games. They understand what that means, and they really play nicely with others. And that's the biggest thing. Like there's not a lot of big egos and not a lot of just a lot of uh, clashing. It's more like, okay, how do we work together on these things? So it's a great group of people. Like I just really I really like all of them.
I've been able to sense that in different interviews that I've watched you be a part of, in different coverage, the Rise podcast and such. I've been able to gather that vibe from it. But you guys fell victim to, I think, a lot of something we're seeing in the industry, across the board, is that layoffs, job cuts, expanding budgets that are ballooning and pushing games. And I would argue that Immortals of Aveum walks this line of AAA, AA, because the visuals are just incredibly stunning. Ascendant, published by EA, but you guys are your own thing. Can you talk a little bit about the difficulty of seeing those, having to make those decisions, I'm sure, and seeing it happen across the industry? That has to be difficult.
It's a crazy time right now. I mean, we see it every day. There's an article every day about some kind of huge layoff. and it's unfortunate. And um, it's certainly like the hardest thing I've had to do.
Hmm.
And you work really hard with people. You know they've put their faith in you and their trust in you, and you want to honor that as much as you can. So when you have to make a decision like that, it really sucks. Um, I we are a independent company. We're not EA. We're not a large organization. Our bottom line, required us to sell a lot of video games, and we didn't meet our targets, and that's just the unfortunate, dollars and cents of it, and that meant we had to do some layoffs, um, and it there are so many things when you're making a game that are out of your control. Certainly, the market and everything can largely be out of your control, and it was just unfortunate for us. But you know, my hope is that I can work with a lot of those people again, and that our next project or our future projects we continue to grow.
Certainly so. Certainly so. I do not envy the position you were in. I also have to wonder, how much does release date play a factor? You've been a part of some huge AAA games, obviously Immortals, that kicked off what I think is just this incredible window where I think we saw a lot of games that got moved from pandemic times and whatnot. But it was, I would argue, a very crowded release kind of window from August through to where we are recording now in early November.
It's maybe the craziest time I've ever seen. I mean, it's one huge game after another. We knew some big games were coming. We knew Starfield was going to be huge. We knew we were releasing the same week as Armored Core, and we knew that that would be big. We knew that Assassin's Creed and Spider-Man games like that were coming out. We didn't realize that Baldur's Gate 3 would blow up in the way it did, like right in front of us.
I don't think
Or
Larian did either, to be fair.
no, it seems to, or Microsoft. It seems to have caught everyone by surprise. So
Mhm.
that was big. And before that, there was other big games. Jedi Survivor, which was part of EA, so we knew all about that. And afterwards, now we're seeing even games like Alan Wake 2 doing huge. So it's been one after another, and it's hard when you're a new IP, especially from a new studio that no one had heard of, to cut through that noise.
Mhm.
There was a lot going on at this time. So for us, release timing was crucial, and really did affect how much people have engaged with the game. Like,
Mhm.
I mean, I'm happy that people that have engaged with the game really like it,
Mhm.
and enjoy it. And we're really hoping that with our new a push coming out later this week, that a lot of people that maybe didn't have the time for it because there were so many other things to play, they find it.
Mhm.
And obviously, we're also going to have like a big price reduction, a half off sale, and things like that. So that
Mhm.
hopefully will help people too.
I know a lot of people in the XEP community reached out asking for this interview, specifically fans of the game that had played it, but also people interested in playing it. And with this next update, which is part of what brings us together, is we're going to get a chance to effectively see a relaunch to some people with those price reductions, an influx of gamers. And there's a lot of Avium to see, a world of magic wielders and ley lines and an Everwar. You've crafted characters and cities and warring parties in this world of Avium. Um, and I have so many questions about it. I guess the first one is this story the genesis of one person or a team that came together to craft the narrative and the story?
It started with a story outline that I'd written. And it kind of during that period I was talking about, right before I founded the company, I had 3 or 4 months to do a lot of writing and think about the game design and think about the narrative and the world and the characters. And that sort of laid the foundation for a lot of what we were going to do. And I think if you read those documents now, like we didn't drift terribly far. There certainly the plot changed a lot, but a lot of the characters were there and a lot of the world was there. Um, but then my lead writer Michael Kirkbride, um, when he and I started really working together in earnest, maybe a year and a half into the project, and really started working on the narrative together. That really, he and I really feel are just a great writing team. We just had a lot of fun writing this, and we riff off each other a lot, and brought just had a lot of fun writing the characters, thinking up the characters and the scenes and the whole storyline and the world. So that that in terms of the dialogue and the characters, that certainly was the two of us. But then there's all the visual storytelling and the way the environments look and the beautiful world and the culture and things like that. And that's my art directors, Dave Bogan and Julia Lichtblau, are just they're phenomenal. So it would as with everything, it's a huge team effort. There were early ideas there, but they only got better as more and more people came onto it.
It wasn't lost on me, knowing your reputation and your experience with Call of Duty, that the Immortals are essentially this spec ops team in a magic world. And they've got, these special powers. Jack, of course, able to use all of them. And you threw them into a moral dilemma against a big bad in Sandrax. Uh, how much did that Call of Duty esque experience influence this magic world, if at all, beyond the first person shooting aspect?
It was sort of in the back of my mind. It probably because I'd spent 9 years on that franchise, it influenced it.
Mm-hmm.
In my subconscious to some degree, but it did feel like we've seen a lot of different fantasy worlds, and having that lens of the military seemed interesting to me. It seemed like a lens that you know it's a little different than Lord of the Rings or some of the other kind of big franchises. It was like, well, what if these were soldiers? What if these really were doing these dangerous missions, for lack of a better word, in this huge Everwar? Um, that just seemed like an interesting angle to approach everything through. Um, and I won't say it came directly from working on Call of Duty, but it that influence might have been there. It was just like, what did I want to do that was different that I hadn't seen before? Because I've seen, and we've all played a lot of fantasy games,
Mm-hmm.
but what is it that's going to make us stand out and be interesting?
Mm-hmm.
And then that led to a lot of world building ideas. What if this world had been under siege for hundreds, if not thousands of years? What would that do to everyone? How would that affect culture? How would that affect the landscape? And just led to a lot of really interesting ideas and discussions. So it became one of the pillars of the world building.
Gotcha. Well, I think, of course, to me, and I think any player, Jack and Kirkin stand out. Darren Barnet and Gina Torres are featured prominently and bring their characters to life. And I have to wonder, how important were they to bringing this IP to bear for you guys?
Oh, they're great. They both were awesome to work with. I one of the several things I did on the game was I directed the actors. So I had the good fortune to direct both Gina and Darren, and they're just super professional. Really got into it, got into the characters. Really just were passionate about it, and they're just great. I mean, I couldn't have been happier. I felt very lucky, and they really fit. They both really fit the characters as I saw them when I was writing them. That was so great to get these amazing actors. It was like pulled from my head. Like, oh yeah, this is exactly what I wanted. So yeah, it was just that whole part of the process, working with the actors, directing the cinematics, working on the dialogue, all that is like, to me, maybe the most fun part of it.
Jack was a protagonist of a lot of personality, and I think that came through in his writing as well as Darren's portrayal of the character. And I do want to talk about the facial animations and such in a moment, but you're directing these actors and you're writing a fantasy, but you didn't have them write in any Shakespearean-esque way or speak in a way that wasn't modern, I guess you would say. That had to be a conscious choice that you made.
It was a very early choice. I didn't want to do traditional old English fantasy. I didn't want this to be Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter. Um, I took my cues from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I wanted to write a Marvel movie, and
Mhm.
you know,
It felt
I,
like, pardon me for interrupting. It felt like it in those opening moments.
yeah,
It felt
yeah.
like an MCU moment.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad. Yeah, because I'm a huge fan of those movies, and what they really do so well is they can put the audience in a completely fantastical, ridiculous, crazy situation and environment. And I'm thinking of movies like Guardians of the Galaxy or Thor, the Thor series, or things where you really are like in a totally different world, but the characters are so relatable that you can slip right into it in a really easy and familiar way. So we had both. We had some characters that were more, they kind of spoke in a more high fantasy way.
Mhm.
Sandrak was one of them. But then we wanted to always play against that and undercut it with characters like Jack, who are much more modern and relatable, and constantly like walking that line. And it was just another way, as a new IP, you're constantly looking for things that are going to be your signature or what's going to make you stand out. There's
Mhm.
so much out there. What's going to make you different? And this to me was a great and a fun way to make us a little bit different than your standard fantasy game.
I think it certainly did, and I think the vocals coupled with the facial animations, seeing someone as well known as Gina Torres there, seeing Jack's face portrayed by Darren kind of on the cover in so many places, did give the game a visual standout, and it was remarkable to me how impressive the visuals were. This felt like a couple of the games this year that really set a bar for what current gen was meant to look like, does look like. Um, we talked earlier about being a small team, but that visual bar that you guys hit was pretty darn high.
Thank you. Yeah, yeah. It was a testament to the whole art team and how great they were, how great they are. Unreal 5 certainly gave us a lot of horsepower. It allowed for a pretty modestly sized team, especially for AAA. We made this game for a much lower budget than what you would see at normal, what you've heard about for a normal AAA game. And Unreal 5 got us there for sure. But I always knew we'd have a hard time competing head to head, just pixel to pixel, and making everything as perfect as something like God of War. We had to be really strong just in our ideas. Like the ideas had to win the day. What the particular level concept was, what the particular environment was, what this particular character looked and sounded like. Like that's you know if we couldn't reach the absolute perfect fidelity, at least we could stand out by making something very interesting and different.
Mhm.
And so that it was always like we're living or dying by the strength and the originality of our ideas, and that applies to the characters. That applies to any given cinematic scene, any given environment, any level that we created. It was what's going to make this cool and interesting on its own, regardless of how good we're able to ultimately make it look. We luckily were able to make it look really damn good, which was awesome. But the ideas always came first.
Unreal 5, and I know very little about making games, so please don't think that I'm coming from a different. It feels like you're able to do a lot more in two different like ranges of visual elements. Like we're very close up on your characters' faces, seeing those reactions, those ticks that they have when they're frustrated, angry, sad. But then we can zoom out and see this massive scope. I will not spoil anything for anyone that hasn't played it, but like there is a massive battle at the end with these giants and ships powered by magic, battling. There's a scope there and a lot of brilliant particle effects as well. Is that Unreal 5 on display? Artists on display? Both?
It's both. Any game engine is a platform, by which you can, sort of bring to bear the best the artists can deliver. And so the engine has to be good, but the artists have to be amazing too. And you can't have one or the other. You need both. So it's a great engine. It's very powerful. We were learning as we were going, for sure, because we were sort of on the cutting edge of things. I think we're still maybe the only game that launched on Unreal 5.1. So we were, laying the track as the train was moving, for sure, and trying to figure everything out. But I think at the end of the day, it comes back to the ideas and back to the artists, and our visual effects team, our audio team. The audio is amazing in the game. The music, all those elements, and that's all just people's talent and their creativity. The Unreal is a delivery system for all that.
I would think it started on Unreal 4 and then made a transition.
We did. We transitioned over. Yeah, I think 2 or 3 years into the project, we transitioned over, which was
Gotcha.
a little bumpy, to say the least.
Yeah, I can imagine. One of the things, well, we've talked about a lot of the setup, but to me, we've ignored some of the gameplay elements like the combat. You have 3 magic types that you make use of: red, blue, and green. But you also have a shield, sigils, a whip, all that can be combined, different skill trees. There's a lot that I think it reminds me of COD, because I'm thinking of COD with you, but like, grenades and stun grenades and all these options. That's a lot of weaponry for the player to make use of. Was that all in there pre-planned? Did you guys come up with stuff on the way, drop stuff on the way?
Yeah, we knew that we wanted the game to be more than just, I've got my one spell or weapon that I like, I'm just going to spam the button and kind of force my way through. And I've certainly played a lot of shooters where I've got my assault rifle and I'm just, got my one grenade and I'm going to town. And look, that's great. And that can be a lot of fun. We definitely had a pillar of spell comboing, of wanting to be able to use different spells in different ways to really be super effective in combat. And so that required of the player to have to use multiple different spells. So you're going to be using your lash to pull someone in, and then you're using your red blast, which kind of acts like a shotgun to blast them at close range. You're gonna want to use your shatter spell to blow up their shield before you can shoot them, and it was always a question of how do you do this plus this, and we call it rock paper scissors design. I see this, so I want to parry, I want to counteract with this other ability. I think we're sort of kind of at the upper edge of complexity when it came to the controls and how you play the game. That being said, I think what we've seen is most players gravitate to a few spells that they really like, a few combos that they really like, and they'll have 2 or 3 of those that are their sort of core spells, and they do great, and you can absolutely play the game that way and have a lot of fun. If you want to use variety, or if you want to play the game again with different and really focus on different spells and upgrade different spells, it's all there. You can there's a dozen different types of builds you can create in the game that or more that play pretty differently. So we just wanted variety, and we wanted, if a player really wanted to try to use everything, they could, or if they wanted to focus, they could. But it was important that there was some strategy involved, and you felt smart and you felt powerful. Everything about the game was about being the battle mage, being a gunslinger, being someone who's, could go into a whole area and you're not, like you have your own personal shield. You're not hiding behind a bush shooting at guys. You're like, able to stand your ground and use the shield and protect yourself and make smart choices really quickly. Like that was all sort of in the DNA of what we're trying to accomplish with the combat. And I'm really happy that it gets such great accolades. People really, people that engage in it really, really love it, which is awesome.
I found myself playing through the game, finding what I liked, diversifying a bit as the skill tree opened up here and there. But then I would check out videos or talk to people in my community that were also playing it, and I realizing there are min maxers out there who are parrying and doing all types of stuff with the different abilities they get, the sigils. I wasn't making use of certain abilities at various points, and they were like, "You are trying to brute force through X when you should be doing Y." And I
Yeah.
discovered some more of that rock paper scissors.
Yeah, it's all there. And we didn't want to make a game so complicated that you needed a doctorate to be able to play it, and have to have a spreadsheet in front of you while you're doing it. It's not like that, but yeah, you can find there are strategies, there are weaknesses to enemies, there are all sorts of things built in that a dedicated or a clever player might be able to find, and that's cool. Or you can brute force it, and you can do all right. You might get frustrated at times, but you can get there.
One of my favorites is the lash. That whip ability is fun to use. I used it in combat, and you guys made use of it in traversal.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, we have a lot of traversal in the game. We have a lot of. We wanted all the control spells to have puzzles associated with them, and so there's puzzle solving. On the main path, you probably found like the puzzles were pretty light. Like they're there. They mix up the gameplay a little bit. They're almost like a palate cleanser. But then if you go off the beaten path and do some of the optional stuff, the puzzles start to get a little crazy. And so we just wanted to make sure that the spells also had, you know, cool abilities in the world. Because I love exploration. I love being able to find that hidden thing, the hidden chest. We have the shroudveins, which are the little mini dungeons that are hidden all over the place. We wanted to make sure those were, really cool, and there were a lot of them. Actually, with this new update, we're adding even more. So
Yes.
yeah, there'll be some new ones. Uh, so I like that kind of stuff, and I like puzzle design a lot too. And even going back to Dead Space, we had puzzles in Dead Space, and I always like trying to design those. I couldn't get many puzzles in Call of Duty, unfortunately, but I had to turn off that part of my brain for a while. But
Mhm.
it turned back on once I started working on Immortals.
It's the puzzles were palette cleanser is a great term because through the course of the campaign, yes, and then as I ventured further away from a beaten path, finding more difficult ones, I was reminded of multiple times like things like the Legend of Zelda, thanks in large and Metroid Prime, uh,
Yeah.
in large part due to the chime that you guys play when you accomplish a puzzle.
Right.
That was crack to me. I loved it. I
Yeah.
loved it. Um, I don't know if there's a special trick to it, but that was an endorphin kick that I thoroughly enjoyed every time.
Yeah. Yeah. That's our credit to our sound designers for that one. Yeah, that's you hear that, you've done something right. You've unlocked something. You found a special piece of gear. I love that kind of stuff. So we put a lot in. Like there's a lot. I don't know. I never counted, but there's lots of puzzles throughout. Lots of hidden stuff.
You did a lot of hidden stuff, but you also hid some stuff in plain sight as well that forces the player to return to an area with a new ability or
Yeah,
with a new, like the lash or floating or things like that. Like there are ways to do things. There was one pillar puzzle that like you knock different things around.
yeah.
That's in the center of one of the cities that I banged my head against for a moment, and then I was like, wait a minute, Metroid-vania esque type thing.
Yeah, we definitely put a lot of Metroidvania stuff throughout all the levels. And sometimes people would get a little frustrated. They'd start to play with it and go, I don't understand what this is. But there's always that, in game design, you're always trying to like create that friction where you're just frustrated up to a point. You don't want to go too far and people get pissed. You're trying to get them right up to a point and then they go, oh, wait a minute. And then when they come back later, they're like, oh, or they get the ability. They're like, that thing I saw before, I can use that now. I can get into that new area. And that's a great feeling. I love that moment in games, those aha moments. So yeah, we put those everywhere. They're every single level, pretty much almost every single level you can go back into, you can revisit. There's new combat challenges. It's harder. And then there's, things you can unlock using those abilities. So yeah, it's a fun part of it. And definitely like it makes the game a bigger game. Like you can spend a lot of hours doing that stuff to get the best gear and everything.
I noticed that as well. And for any listener that's unfamiliar with Immortals of Aveum, the shroudveins that we kind of mentioned earlier, I guess the best equivalent might be the shrines in Breath of the Wild. Would that be a
Yeah,
fair equivalent?
yeah. Yes, there may be an old design document that says exactly that.
Hey, there you go. There you go. I uh I want to get to this new update and what it's bringing, but I'm gonna let a listener do that for me. Rick Davis wrote in and asked about quality of life changes or improvements that are coming in this update. Is this something that we're going to see more of? He says he really was interested in and just some of the weapons that you guys have and the improvements that are coming in this week's big patch. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. The patch is awesome. It's the Echollector edition, which is
The Echollector.
Echollector.
Well,
It's
that's cool.
it's the name of a new boss that we've added to the game. Um, and there's a lot of new stuff. There's a couple of new bosses actually. There's some new shroudveins, pretty high level challenge, um, uh, optional combat spaces and things like that. We added a new difficulty mode, so it's a harder difficulty mode, the Grand Magnus difficulty. We added New Game Plus, so you can finish the game and play again with all your gear and all your talents. And the game gets a little more challenging, but you've got all your whole kit to fight with. Um, and What else have we added? And then there's just been a lot of performance increases. The game runs better, it looks better. We've solved a lot of issues that we had early on. We fixed a lot of bugs, so it's. I kind of feel like this is the best version of Immortals of Aveum, and it's the version that I'm really really proud of. On top of that, we've got a free trial. You can download the game for free and play the first, couple hours at least for free if you want to just try it out.
Is that
Um,
via EA Play or just in general?
it just in general.
Nice.
I think it's certainly on PlayStation and Xbox. Um, I think it's for PC as well, but you can just uh, download the game and play it, and you can get to a certain distance, and
Hmm.
then you have the option to buy it, and it's at a huge price discount. The game when we when it drops on the 16th, the game's half off.
Hmm.
So between the free trial and half off and all the new features we have in it, I'm really hoping that people really discover the game or rediscover it and check it out because it's something we're really really proud of.
I suppose there are a couple of things that come to mind there. For you said the Echollector is a new boss.
Mhm.
That would suggest that this new content takes place after the story.
Well, you can get to some of it before you finish the game.
Hmm.
It's just going to be really hard,
Hmm.
so you may not want to fully go after it until
Hmm.
you've got some of the best gear. And now that we have New Game Plus, you might not want to go after it until you've actually completed a loop and go at it again.
Mm-hmm.
But it's I think it's not all just gated for just the end of the game. We wanted to make sure you could if you hadn't quite finished the game yet, but you want to check out the new stuff, you could.
I like the idea of New Game Plus because there were a couple achievements that required dialogue with certain characters at certain moments that I missed here and there.
Yeah.
Was that kind of among player feedback that you guys had heard?
Yeah, we have some achievements that you need to play again to get. I think that in hindsight, I probably wouldn't do that again because it's a
Mm-hmm.
little frustrating. But it kind of it is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, now you can go back and do it all again.
You talked about a new difficulty level in Grand Magnus. Well, Ellery wrote in with a question asking about when you're creating a game, is there a story level difficulty like a super easy mode? And if not, is that something that you uh, deal with or concern yourself with when you are working on crafting a story that's more immersive versus the challenge of combat? Make sure I read that right.
We do have a more casual mode.
Mm-hmm.
You can opt into, and the game is quite a bit easier if you just want to enjoy the narrative. If you don't want to, get killed 20 times in a boss or whatever. And you can also switch the difficulty on the fly. Like if you're just finding a challenging moment and it's too hard for you, you can lower the difficulty and get through it,
Mm-hmm.
and then raise it back up again. So yeah, we certainly have that, and it's important because I wasn't really trying to make the game just for hardcore gamers. I wanted anyone to be able to play it, and we spent a lot of time on the story, and we're telling a huge story, as you know. So if that's what you're coming for, don't let the shooting part of it be a complete barrier. It's fun, and hopefully people enjoy that part of it, but you can also, definitely play in a more casual way.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the other side of it, we've added the ridiculous difficulty that for the masochists out there.
I'm very curious to see how that is received because there were moments that I was just I could tell that if I was 5 years younger, 10 years younger, I could have caught. I had those moments there, but any listener that was unfamiliar with Avium to this point has certainly noted by now that we are talking about a story and a campaign. Brett, you crafted a single player first person shooter at a time where we're seeing companies talk about monetization, games as service, rolling things out and having constant updates next to, quite interestingly, all these layoffs that we talked about at various points and ballooning of budgets. But you made a single player narrative game, a first person shooter at that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it was a risk, because of exactly what you're saying. That a lot of the big companies, a lot of the trends were sort of moving in a different direction. But look at all the big games that came out this year. When you think about single player versus multiplayer, Baldur's Gate, Assassin's Creed, Spider-Man 2, uh, you
Alan
know,
Wake.
Alan Wake. Like the list goes on and on. They're all single player.
Mm-hmm.
They're all single player. People love a great story. They love being immersed. I mean, people love competition and multiplayer too. But one of the things what I found was, um, and this is maybe controversial, but I almost felt like single player in a way was less risky because with multiplayer, you've got people that are really passionate about one or two games and they've put hundreds of hours in those games. And trying to pull them away from that experience is really, really hard. It's really challenging. And as opposed to if you're just telling a great new story, everyone likes a good story. So I think that is a little more of an attractive offering, and the investment is a little less. Like you said, you don't have to play for hundreds of hours and wait for the content to roll in over months or anything. You just get to buy the game, play it, enjoy it, have a great time, move on, maybe play it again. But like I usually do. I usually play single player games a few times because I want to see everything. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a very different experience. But I mean, clearly this year and really every year, if you look at the top 10 selling games in every year, there's always a lot of single player there. It's never gone. It's never gone away.
Mhm.
Um, I think a lot of big companies and publishers maybe chasing that multiplayer audience a lot, but let's not leave the other audience behind in that pursuit.
Mhm. Brett, I want to make sure I don't skip over anything in the update that maybe is there that we haven't talked about, because I know this will be a reintroduction for a lot of people, but it will be, uh, or rather an introduction, but it will be, I'll be returning to it. And I've got these new shroud veins that I'll be able to check out, new bosses to check out. Anything that we haven't mentioned that I need to give due time to? Because I have one more listener question.
No, I think that's it. For me, I like the fact that we have New Game Plus because I always do that whenever I play a big campaign, and I've got like half the talents. I didn't buy all the talents, and I didn't get all the legendary items, and I wanted to get more. You also like to have that, at least at the beginning of your New Game Plus, you kind of have that revenge tour where you're you're really powerful and you're like able to kick ass in a way that you weren't able to when you first played. So that having that experience is cool. So I'm glad we're able to get that in. But yeah, no, it's the bosses, the shroud veins, the new difficulty level, new game plus. It's a big offering. It's a lot. There's a lot there. We've done a lot of work.
Paid update? I meant to ask that. Is it a paid
Paid
update?
update. What do you mean? Like,
Like, does it cost for
oh
anybody that's
no, no,
not?
no, 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 no. This is all free. This is all
There
free.
you go.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's all free. Well, in fact, the game's half off. So
Very cool.
it's yeah. So no, it's all free update.
The one of my listeners, James, he was asking me about Avium and whatnot, and he was curious because, and I tend to agree, the visual fidelity stood out. And you talked about like tweaks in performance and stuff, and that makes us think in Xbox territory about the Series S, which I'm alluding to Larry and learning the Series S and debates of powerful, not powerful. Was your experience different between making like a base level PC version, Xbox version for S, for X, PlayStation 5 version? Was it different, overly different?
Yeah, yeah, it is. The S is challenging for a developer, no question about it. You have memory restraints, constraints, I should say, that are hard, and you have to, unfortunately, strip out some detail in order to really get a good experience.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not a surprise. It's a less powerful machine than the X. So
Mm-hmm.
there's going to be a compromise you're making to the game to some degree. It's inevitable. So yeah, there was, especially as we were finishing the game, there was a lot of work to make sure that it was a good experience on the S, that it looked good. Um, you're just dealing. You're dealing with a very different beast than the PlayStation 5 or the Xbox X or a high end PC. Like that's kind of all at one level, and then you know. But we also had to make the game work well for lower spec PC, and so Xbox S kind of fits it in that as well. So in kind of that tier, and that's actually one thing we have done is the PC specs for the game have been lowered. You can get a great experience for I think a lower spec than what we initially launched at.
This might seem counterintuitive, but do you think the industry is going in that direction where you have to have a low spec and a high spec version, given that games stream now? You play things in the cloud. Is that a direction the industry is going?
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I think you always want to be able to have a game available to the biggest audience you possibly can. As a creator, I want everyone to play the game. I don't want there to be a barrier to entry because of technology, really. Yeah, and I think as we see more and more streaming come online, that's going to be you're definitely going to have that barrier for sure. So yeah, I mean, I think you're fighting against. You always want things to look better and better. We're everyone I know that's making games, we're perfectionists. We're wanting things to be beautiful, and we're always trying to push the medium forward in some way. But you don't want to leave people behind while you're doing that. So it's hard. It's a give and take. You make some decisions that okay, it's not going to look quite as good, but we don't want all these people that can't afford a huge PC to not be able to play the game.
Right.
So yeah, it's a constant push and pull.
Yeah. I often like to ask developers that come on as they release or gauge windows of release, or even look at a second life, if the subscription service model makes sense or doesn't for their game, because each game is different, single player, multiplayer, all of these elements. Was Game Pass or PlayStation Plus or any of the others out there an interest at any point?
Yeah, I mean, I think it speaks to the ability to get as many people to play the game as possible. I want a huge audience. I want you know the more people that can play, the better, in my opinion. And that's not just from a commercial point of view. It's just from a creative, like, I'm making these things to connect with other people. Like, that's why I do this. So I want to connect with more people. The um, and I think there is a good chance that we will show up on those services at some point. We didn't initially launch with it. I don't really understand fully the economics behind streaming, because I'm not, I only pretend to be a businessman. So I'm not sure how it would have affected us one way or another. If it would have been a great idea or a bad idea commercially, I really don't know. And the economics, I think the economic model for things like Game Pass has certainly changed over time. So it's hard to say, but I think in the spirit of having as many people play as possible, I have a feeling we'll definitely show up on those services.
That's awesome.
Maybe sooner than later.
Gotcha. Very cool. Well, Brett, this is an interview that I'm so grateful for. I've so sincerely looked forward to it since I got my hands on Avium. There was something about that world that spoke to me, and so I'm appreciative to you for taking the time today and for sharing the game with listeners. And I'm so excited to see what this new update brings. Echollector edition.
Echollector edition. Thanks, man. I really appreciate it. It feels good to hear that you were a fan. That's awesome. I hope more and more people play it, because it's a great game. We made it. I'm really proud of the game. I think it's an awesome game, and I think and people love a great story, and they love a great action game. They want to play something that's fun, and especially if they want to play something different. I mean, how many sequels and franchises did we see this year? Let's try something new. So yeah, I hope people discover it. But thank you, man. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, listeners, if you're listening when this first releases, do check out the game while it's on sale. Absolutely well worth your time. Both Logan and I thoroughly enjoyed it over at XEP, and we hope you guys do too. And that's going to be it for us. Brett, thank you for joining me. And have
Thanks,
a great
man.
rest of your week. Take care, guys.